Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're your go-to for all things Nepal, straight from the Nepali Diaspora Network.
Your source for news, views, and those insights you might not find anywhere else. We're diving deep into what's been happening back home, giving you that clear, concise overview.
But it's more than just a rundown of the headlines, right? We're connecting the dots. We're highlighting those fascinating details you might miss otherwise.
Exactly, leaving you with something to think about, something to ponder.
So let's get right into it. We got some pretty interesting economic news to kick things off. Nepal's back on that FATF gray list, and the central bank, the NRB, they're taking it seriously.
Yeah, the Financial Action Task Force, that gray list is a bit of a red flag, isn't it? Basically means a country isn't doing enough to combat money laundering and terrorism financing. And for Nepal, well, it could make attracting foreign investment tougher. Borrowing costs could go up, and it definitely doesn't do any favors for their international reputation.
And the NRB, they're not playing around. Stricter financial monitoring for major institutions like the Employees Provident Fund, the Citizen Investment Trust, they're really focusing on transactions by high-ranking officials.
What's interesting to me is they're even scrutinizing family members of these officials. That's a pretty strong sign that the NRB is serious about meeting these FATF requirements.
No kidding. It sounds like they're pulling out all the stops. But I'm curious, what does all this mean for, say, investments or remittances for Nepalese abroad?
It's a great question. Definitely something to keep an eye on. The goal here is transparency, improving financial security, but there is a chance it could slow things down. Maybe more bureaucracy for those sending money back home. It's still early, though. We'll just have to see how it all plays out.
Okay, makes sense. So cracking down on financial crime, that's one thing. But at the same time, the NRB is also dealing with this liquidity crunch, injecting a whopping Rs 30 billion into the system. Didn't we hear about this a while back? Feels like putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
You're not wrong to be skeptical. I mean, yeah, it offers some relief in the short term, but it doesn't really address the root causes of this liquidity crunch, right? There are some deeper economic issues at play here.
Like what kinds of issues are we talking about? Like structural problems within the system itself?
Partly, yeah. Think about limited access to credit, especially for smaller businesses. And the lack of diversification in the economy, that plays a role too. But it's also connected to things like government spending, how revenue is collected. It's a complex situation, honestly. A lot to unpack there.
A lot for the NRB to juggle, that's for sure. So switching gears a little bit, they also made some interesting changes to auto loan policies. This one really had me scratching my head, making it harder to get loans for electric vehicles. But at the same time, making it easier for petrol and diesel vehicles. Why discourage EVs when, everyone's trying to go green?
It is a curious move. One possible explanation, the NRB might be worried about the impact of EVs on Nepal's balance of payments. Importing those EVs, it's expensive. It could put a strain on their foreign currency reserves. Maybe they're prioritizing short-term economic stability, even if it means putting those long-term environmental goals on the back burner.
Could be. It does raise questions, though, doesn't it? About their commitment to green energy, their vision for the future of transportation. What would you say this means for someone in the diaspora thinking about importing a vehicle back to Nepal?
Definitely something to consider. If you're set on an EV, you might be looking at higher upfront costs now. Adds another layer of complexity to the decision.
Okay, so let's move on from the world of finance. Let's talk about infrastructure and connectivity. Starting with some good news. Construction has finally begun on the 37 milli Upper Myagdi hydropower project. Big investment, but this is about more than just generating more electricity for Nepal, right?
You got it. This project is a step towards energy independence, a big one. By boosting their domestic electricity generation, they rely less on those energy imports, which, can be vulnerable to external factors, price fluctuations, political instability, you name it.
So it strengthens their energy security, which is critical for long-term stability. But not everything's rosy on the infrastructure front, is it? I read about potential internet shutdowns on the horizon.
Yeah, unfortunately. Seems to be a recurring issue in Nepal these days. The internet service providers, mostly Indian companies like Airtel and Tata, they're warning about potential shutdowns. The government's delaying approval for them to, get this, pay their bills to foreign providers.
Hold on. Why would government hold up those payments? Is this just like typical bureaucratic inefficiency, or is there something more to it?
It's probably a combination of things, partly bureaucratic for sure. The Ministry of Communications, they're taking their sweet time to approve the foreign currency exchange for these payments. But there might be some political maneuvering going on, too. This whole thing touches on Nepal's relationship with India, how much they rely on Indian companies for those essential
And
services.
this isn't the first time we've seen this, is it? Weren't there nationwide internet shutdowns pretty recently?
Exactly. Last year, Airtel actually cut off service because of unpaid bills, caused a lot of chaos, highlighted just how vulnerable Nepal is when it comes to internet access, this current delay. It's fueling those concerns about their digital sovereignty, how dependent they are on foreign companies.
It's a worrying trend for sure, especially with how much we rely on the internet for everything these days. Communication, business. Imagine the impact on the Nepalese diaspora if there's another shutdown.
Incredibly disruptive. Keeping in touch with family and friends back home, managing businesses, investments, who would all be affected, really underscores the need for Nepal to develop a more robust internet infrastructure, something they can rely on themselves.
It's a big issue, one that deserves more attention. Okay, let's shift gears again. Trade and consumption. Some interesting trends popping up here. Despite all those economic concerns we talked about, it seems like people in Nepal are still spending on luxury goods. Kind of a head scratcher, isn't it?
It is. It's boosting customs revenue, which is good for the government. But it also begs the question, what about income inequality in Nepal? If people can afford luxury goods while the economy struggles, it suggests a widening gap between the rich and the poor.
Makes sense. And it's not just about big purchases like cars. We're seeing a big increase in revenue from imported motorcycles too, particularly unassembled ones. What's the story there?
Interesting, right. It's possible that importing unassembled motorcycles helps avoid certain import taxes regulations.
Hmm.
Maybe that makes them more affordable.
A clever workaround if that's the case. But regardless of the reason, this trend, it could be relevant for people in the diaspora involved in importing goods, right?
Absolutely. It shows there's still a market for luxury goods, high-end vehicles, even if it's concentrated among certain groups. And for those considering investments, it offers a glimpse into consumer behavior, spending patterns.
Good point. Oh, and speaking of booms, can't forget about the export boom happening at the Burgunj border.
Exports have more than doubled, mainly thanks to refined soybean and sunflower oil. A good thing, definitely. But it does make you think about diversification. Is Nepal becoming too reliant on just a few key products for their export earnings?
The million-dollar question. This boon is great, don't get me wrong. But relying too heavily on a few things can be risky. If something happens in those markets, Nepal's economy could take a hit. Diversifying those exports, that should be a top priority.
I couldn't agree more. Long-term economic stability, it hinges on having that diverse range of exports, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Well said. And a great place for us to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've talked about a lot, the complexities of the financial system, the need for a stronger internet infrastructure, and some intriguing trends in trade. We'll be back soon with part 2, where we'll delve into some of the social, cultural, and political developments happening back in Nepal. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We were just discussing Nepal's economy, the ups and downs, and the challenges they're facing with internet connectivity, and of course, those interesting trends in trade we were just talking about.
It never stops, does it? So much happening back home. But before we jump into the next topic, I just wanted to remind everyone, the Nepali Diaspora Network, we're your one-stop shop for all things Nepal. News, views, insights, the whole 9 yards. And if you want a deeper dive on anything we talk about today, you can always check out our website. That's nepalidiaspora.net.
It really is a fantastic resource, especially for staying connected with Nepal and the global Nepalese community.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, let's shift gears a little. Let's talk about some social and cultural developments happening in Nepal. And, well, we have to start with the recent earthquake. That 6.1 magnitude quake that hit Sindapultak district. That's serious, especially considering how vulnerable Nepal is to seismic activity. It must have been pretty scary for those who felt it.
Oh, definitely a wake-up call. It's a reminder that Nepal sits right on that major fault line. Earthquakes, they're a reality there. Thankfully, no reports of major damage or casualties this time around. But it's a good reminder, isn't it, about being prepared, having a plan, securing heavy objects, knowing what to do if the ground starts shaking again.
Can't be complacent about those things. Speaking of cultural events, we just saw the celebration of Mahashivaratri. Thousands of devotees flocking to Pachupatanath Temple. The images are always so powerful, the colors, the energy, such a display of faith. One thing that always stands out to me, the open marijuana use. The sadhus and pilgrims, it's pretty striking. Can you talk a bit about the cultural and religious significance of that?
Yeah, it's definitely a unique aspect of Mahashivaratri. Marijuana, it's generally illegal in Nepal, but during this festival, it's viewed as a way to connect with the deity Shiva, a tradition going back centuries. And usually the authorities kind of look the other way during the event.
So a temporary exception, you could say, for religious purposes.
Hmm.
Does this ever come up in those broader discussions about legalizing cannabis in Nepal?
It adds fuel to the fire, for sure. There are definitely ongoing discussions about legalizing it, medicinal, recreational purposes. It's a complicated issue, though. Social, economic, political implications, the tolerance during Mahashivaratri. It might add to those conversations, but ultimately it's up to the government to decide.
A lot to consider there. And it wasn't just Pashupatinath that drew huge crowds. Other temples, Doleswar Mahadev, for example, also saw a massive influx of devotees. What makes these temples so significant, especially during this festival?
Each temple, it has its own unique history, religious significance. People are drawn to them not just for their religious value, but also for their cultural and architectural beauty. Doleshwar Mahadev, they believe it's the head of Kedarnath, and that's one of the most sacred pilgrimage sites for Hindus.
It's fascinating how these traditions, they continue to thrive, they bring people together. Now, a different kind of celebration. The WHO, they recently confirmed Nepal has maintained its elimination of maternal and neonatal tetanus. That's amazing. Something for the entire diaspora to be proud of.
Absolutely a huge win. It means mothers and newborns in Nepal, they're no longer at risk from this deadly disease. It's a real testament to how effective those vaccination programs have been and how dedicated they are to improving maternal health care. Nepal has come such a long way.
It really highlights the progress they're making in public health, development, all of it. But even with all this progress, there are still challenges, right? We talked about the economy earlier, but there are other social issues that need attention. Like in the study that found that LGBTQI plus youth in Nepal, they're facing significant mental health challenges.
Yeah.
But they often struggle to find the support they need. It's really heartbreaking to think about these young people dealing with such hardship.
It's such a critical issue. LGBTQI plus youth, they're especially vulnerable because of the stigma they face. Discrimination, social exclusion, rejection from their families, bullying, discrimination in healthcare settings. It's a lot to carry.
It shouldn't be this way. What kind of barriers are they facing when they try to access mental health care in Nepal?
Well, there's often a lack of understanding, awareness about LGBTQI plus issues,
Yeah.
even among healthcare professionals. And there's just a general shortage of mental health resources, which, makes the problem even worse. If you don't have that culturally sensitive care, a lot of these individuals, they just don't seek help.
It's a complex issue. It needs a multi-pronged approach. But what role can the diaspora play here in supporting these young people, advocating for better mental health services?
The diaspora, they can be so powerful in this, raising awareness within their communities abroad, advocating for LGBTQI plus rights, supporting organizations on the ground in Nepal. Financial support, of course, is crucial, but also just amplifying those voices, those experiences on an international level.
Building those bridges of support, understanding, it can make a world of difference. Now, let's turn our attention to another social issue that's been generating a lot of discussion in Nepal. Divorce law reform. What's the latest there? What are the arguments for and against changing those laws?
Right now, some people feel like the laws are biased in favor of women, especially when it comes to dividing property during a divorce. And that's led to some calls for reform, to make things more balanced, reflect the changing social and economic realities in Nepal.
What are some specific concerns they're raising about the current laws? And what changes are they proposing?
One big concern is that it's really hard for men to initiate a divorce right now. So some men, they might feel trapped in unhappy marriages because they're afraid of losing their property. And some argue that women can actually use these laws, to get financial gain. So it's a really sensitive issue. The proposed reforms, they aim to create a more equitable system, one that's fair, protects the rights of everyone involved, regardless of gender.
Sounds like a thorny issue. Valid points on both sides. What about those who are against changing these laws? What are they saying?
They often say that the current laws, they're there to protect women because in Nepalese society, women are often in a more vulnerable position. They worry that any changes could actually weaken those protections, make women more susceptible to exploitation, even abuse.
It's a tough balance to strike, ensuring fairness, equality,
Yeah.
but also addressing those concerns about potential vulnerabilities. This whole debate, it really highlights how Nepalese society is evolving. That conversation about gender roles, expectations, it's changing too.
Absolutely. It reflects a shifting social landscape and the need for laws that are relevant to the Nepal of today, fair laws. It's definitely an ongoing discussion, and it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Now let's step into the world of politics and governance. Some interesting developments there. Nepal, they're actively seeking a seat on the UN Human Rights Council. That's a big step for the country.
Huge. The Human Rights Council, they're responsible for promoting and protecting human rights globally. If Nepal gets a seat, they have a voice in shaping international policies, a platform to showcase their progress in this area, and an opportunity to advocate for marginalized groups.
It would elevate their standing on the world stage. And the diaspora, they would be empowered to engage in human rights advocacy as well. Can you break down exactly what this council does, and how does this fit in with Nepal's overall foreign policy goals?
So the council, they address human rights violations, they develop international human rights standards, and they provide a platform for discussing these critical issues. For Nepal, this bid for a seat, it signifies their commitment to taking a more active role in international affairs, positioning themselves as a champion for human rights. It's a clear sign, they want to be a responsible, engaged member of the global community.
Definitely a positive step, something to watch closely. Now, back on the home front, the government has launched this, I guess you could call it, ambitious e-governance blueprint. What exactly is that about?
Essentially, it's a plan to digitize a lot of government services, to make them more accessible, efficient, transparent, applying for permits and licenses online, paying taxes digitally, things like that.
Streamlining things, that would be a welcome change. For everyone, including the diaspora. Imagine handling all those administrative tasks remotely.
Exactly. It could be a game changer for Nepalese abroad who need to access government services. Of course, there are challenges, making sure everyone has the digital literacy skills to navigate these systems. And cybersecurity, data privacy, those are big issues that need to be addressed. We're talking about sensitive information here.
Good points. But if they can get it right, this e-governance initiative, it has the potential to transform Nepal. It seems like they're really promoting this digitalization, but at the same time, they're expressing concerns about the misuse of technology. How do they reconcile those two things?
It's a balancing act. Lots of countries are trying to figure this out. They see the benefits of technology, of course, but they're also very aware of the risks. Cybercrime, misinformation, online harassment. It's about finding that sweet spot, promoting responsible use of technology while harnessing all that power for good.
It makes sense. Protecting free speech, online security, it's a tough needle to thread. Now, for our final political update, we have to talk about former King Gyanendra Shah. His recent video message has been causing quite a stir.
It has. It seemed like he was hinting at wanting a more active role in Nepalese politics, which of course reignited those discussions about the monarchy. But we have to remember, Nepal's transition to a republic, that was a long, hard-fought battle. It was a huge shift in power, reflecting the aspirations of the Nepalese people.
Can you remind us, how did Nepal become a republic in the first place? And given that history, what are the chances of the monarchy being restored?
Centuries of monarchy, a decade-long Maoist insurgency, and a massive popular uprising. All of that led to the abolishment of the monarchy back in 2008. Since then, Nepal has embraced its new identity, a federal democratic republic. There might be some nostalgia for the monarchy among some, but most Nepalese seem happy with the current system.
So restoration of the monarchy, not very likely then, at least for now. It's fascinating, though. This whole story, it speaks to the ongoing evolution of Nepal's political landscape, that push and pull between its past, present, and future.
Definitely. It's a reminder that history always plays a role, even as Nepal charts its own course as a republic.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the final part of our journey into all things Nepal. We've talked about the economy, the ups and downs, infrastructure, some pretty heavy social issues, and even touched on politics.
Phew, we have covered a lot, but hey, there's always more to learn and discuss when it comes to Nepal. Before we wrap up, though, I just want to say the Nepalese people, they're incredibly resilient.
It's true. I mean, look at everything they've been through, and yet there's this vibrancy, a spirit, a determination to overcome any obstacle.
Absolutely. Rebuilding after those devastating earthquakes, tackling public health issues, striving for economic progress. There's such a strong sense of community and a commitment to building a better future for Nepal.
And we can't forget about the diaspora. They play such a vital role in all of this.
They really do. Remittances, investments, keeping Nepalese culture and traditions alive all over the world.
It's inspiring to see how connected they remain to their homeland, a real force for positive change. Speaking of change, I wanted to bring up something that's been on my mind. Environmental concerns. We touched on the eucalyptus issue before, but what other environmental challenges is Nepal facing?
Well, Nepal has this incredibly rich biodiversity, but the ecosystems are fragile. They're up against deforestation, pollution, and of course, climate change.
Yeah, climate change, it's a global issue, but it's hitting Nepal hard, isn't it?
It is. More extreme weather events, floods, droughts, all of which can be devastating for communities and their livelihoods.
It's a critical issue that needs attention now. What's being done to address these challenges, and how can the diaspora help?
The government has a bunch of initiatives in place, promoting sustainable forestry, investing in renewable energy, raising awareness about climate change, and the diaspora. They can support organizations working on the ground, advocate for policies that promote sustainability, and even make changes in their own lives to lessen their impact on the environment.
It's a collective effort, right?
Sure.
Protecting the environment, it's not just a local issue, it's a global responsibility. Now, before we sign off, I was to highlight another side of Nepal that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Tourism.
Ah, Nepal, such a beautiful country. Those majestic Himalayas, the vibrant cities, ancient temples. It's a truly unique travel destination.
Totally agree. And so much to do. Trekking, mountaineering, wildlife safaris, cultural tours, you name it, Nepal has it.
And for Nepal's economy, tourism is a lifeline. Jobs, revenue, all of that supports local communities.
Exactly. So anyone out there planning their next adventure, Nepal should be at the top of your list. It's a place that'll stay with you long after you leave.
And for those in the diaspora or maybe haven't been back in a while, it's a chance to reconnect with your roots, see the beauty of Nepal for yourself.
And speaking of the diaspora, I wanted to give a shout out to belayit.uk.
Ah, yes, a great platform. Connects the Nepalese community in the UK.
Think of it like a classified site specifically for Nepalese people. Jobs, housing, events, even a way to connect with Nepalese-owned businesses.
It's all about building that sense of community, supporting each other, something that's really important to the Nepali diaspora network as well.
Absolutely. And on that note, a reminder to everyone, visit our website, nepalidiaspora.net, for all the latest news, insights, and to stay connected with the global Nepalese community.
We've taken you on quite a journey in this deep dive, haven't we? Exploring all those challenges and opportunities facing Nepal, the rich culture, the incredible strength of its people.
We hope you found it informative, engaging, and we encourage you all to keep exploring, keep learning, and stay connected to Nepal in whatever way you can.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep that spirit of Nepal alive wherever you are in the world.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.